Even when we say the three jewels of Buddhism, the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, the, the Dharma, the law, is the essence. Also, the word Dharma we translate it to same as law. Last time I told you that law means, or Dharma refers to the means of practice. And so, what method or what means is it to attain to? For example, if you're going to the very top of a mountain, then you have to learn the road, and you also have to learn how steep it is, and you also have to learn if there is a well in the way. You need to have a proper information. Then only you'll be able to reach the top of the mountain. So what this means, or this method, is for what is it this method for? So this method is to escape from suffering. So if a patient visits a doctor, then doctors already know what is the method for this patient to escape from his suffering, which was already proven by different scientific researches, and he will prescribe to the patient what is it that he has to do, and medicines will act on his own, and they know how much of the medicine or how much of the medication the patient has to take. Then he will get better, and maybe after a week or so he will get better. The doctor is already aware of this, which means, in other way, doctor is aware of the method to cure the patient. So we say a good doctor is someone who knows what is the accurate method to cure a patient. If a doctor says, maybe he will get better or maybe he won't get better, that is not a good doctor. At times, a doctor could say the percentage of his well-being or percentage that he might not recover could also depend on the conditions that the patient takes. So that's also on the way from the doctor that he's trying his best. So having a proper understanding of the Dharma or the law, here we are going to study the accurate method. When we say some of the methods are inaccurate, about 0.1%, even if you practice the inaccurate method, that also means that there's a chance that 99% or 99 people will not get proper education, but about only 1% will be saved. So when you say the accurate method, it's almost like a math formula. So when we give a condition that he or she might get better, that this is a proper condition, then he or she has to understand what is the proper law, and the condition should not change to everyone, but it should be accurate just like a math formula. A formula always has a clear answer. And just like this, Buddha's teachings are those accurate methods to remove yourself from the suffering. Just like we learn multiplication table, if you don't have a if you don't have a proper understanding of Buddha's teaching, and based on the proper teaching, if you're not able to distinguish what is wrong and what is right, there is no much meaning to practice your Buddhist faith. Of course, it doesn't mean that maybe if there is 0.1% error, that could also mean that it's better to do than not doing at all. That also means that about 99% could also have problems, whereas only 1% will be saved. So when you say the proper doctrine or proper Dharma, it means we are talking about the Buddha's proper ways to practice ascetic practice, and in that way, the sufferings of the mankind will be reduced. If we don't do it properly, that means you're forming the Buddha's idea on our own in our head, and we will be attached to our own stubbornness. Then when we are talking about the proper method, for example, there are many different boats, and if the engine is broken down, or if the captain is drunk, or if the captain is ignorant, or if the captain is very harsh, or if the captain is like a 유병한, or if there's a hole in the ship, so before boarding the ship, if you think you will die before you reach to the other side of the island, then you have to throw the ship first. That is a wrong law or wrong Dharma. That doesn't mean that Dharma is inaccurate, but that means that Dharma is something that even if you practice it, you won't be able to remove yourself from the agony. So if you have a proper thoughts about Dharma, and if you have wished to remove yourself from agony, then it's best to release your hand when you realize that it is a wrong Dharma from the beginning. And also those who study first, if you feel that this person is full of wrong thoughts, and this person keeps thinking in the other way while you're studying, and if the person desires some other paths other than you, and if you feel the person but even if you feel that the person is buying you food and all, and if you think that person is a nice person, but no matter how much he buys for you, the person is leading you to a wrong path. So a lot of Tibetans, I think it's same in Korea, when you have met this kind of wrong person, and if he keeps doing wrong things or saying wrong sayings, if you met them as a person, you could just say hello, but you don't even sit there and drink tea with them. If you sit and drink tea with them, then your thoughts will distance yourself from studying. If you don't do that while studying, then you cannot progress. Because you do not have a proper thought about the proper practice, and your thoughts will get a little more vague. And so if you have a concrete thought in your head, and if you feel that this is against Buddha's teaching, and if this is not a wrong and if this is not a right teaching, then you understand that whatever he says is a wrong saying, and with that method you cannot remove yourself from suffering. You should be able to distinguish the wrong and the right of those things, and then only you will be stepping into the path of studying. Do not just listen to this. Since I cannot point out each of you, I'm telling you this story so that you could make your own judgment. So if it's wrong, then and release yourself from whatever wrongs you're doing. And so if you are meeting someone who is distant from practice, you should just see them just like a social life, but you should not spend time with them, or you should not you should not follow them every day. And if you feel if you don't hang around with them, they will be distanced from Buddha teaching. If you feel that's the case, then you should understand that it is not easy for you to lead that person to the proper Buddha's teaching. So here, when you say the proper method, it's something that Buddha has spoken to us that if you do this way, then you'll be able to distance yourself from suffering. You should have a proper understanding of this. That only you will have the determination and you will know the path to it, and it will lead to a good result. If not, then even if you practice Buddhism, there will be no benefit. Your body keeps moving in this direction, but if you have so many wrong karmas and if you have so many bad habits, then there's no point in the temples and practicing Buddhism. All the meanings get lost and it doesn't help the person itself too. So as said, Dharma is a means of practice. Dharma means stages of practice. And depending on the stages of practice, it's advisable for you to study. So just like we spoke in Lam, if you cannot practice, then you cannot meditate, and no arahant will also be practiced, and nothing will be done. If you are not a human, then you cannot practice. A practitioner is someone who has the highest quality of spirituality amongst men. Once someone said, he spoke in a very official place, that monks are those who only practices and priests are those who only tries to act in a missionary way. Do you know what is a practice? If you don't know what is a practice, then how can you pass on your religion to someone else? Just like copper, if there is no electricity or if there's no spark, or if you don't understand what is an electricity, then what's the point of having a copper? Just like that, if you don't know what is there to propagate, then how can you pass on your religion to someone else? The most important thing is having a good quality electricity. If you just propagate, if you don't know what you're teaching, that's very inappropriate speech. I didn't want to speak about this, but I don't think the God created the war, the Korean War, and if you say it's the God who raised the war, how I don't think that's right. If you have that kind of thoughts, and if you are giving me excuse, that's something that you should speak about it inside the church, but outside the church. It is something that in the church you wear different clothes, but you just when you come out of in the church you wear underpants? Does it mean that, but it actually means your inside and your outside is different. And it also means your external and internal behavior is different. So maybe in your heart you could be a thief. We had a police in Yosu. He was wearing the police costume, but he actually went inside the houses to steal. We say they are two-faced people. So what is it that inside the church you say that God gave you the suffering, He tested you, but when you come out of church you say that God didn't give you the suffering? What is it? At least if you are able to write some comments on the newspaper, then you should be at least if you're able to write on an editorial page, then at least you should not have the kind of mistake that you fall for your own words. When we were colonized by Japan, there were so many people who suffered, and there were so many grandmothers. About 300,000 people committed suicide. About 300,000 Korean ladies were taken to Japan, and a lot of them died, and a lot of them could never come back to Korea, and they were harassed, and they are also still left in somewhere in China and Southeast Asia. There's so many people who died. That's because they don't give us the list of the people that they have taken. That's why we are not even able to know how many of them still died. And for something so disastrous, you claim that it is the act of the God. In something like this, if you say it is understood inside the church that the God has given us this suffering, and if you say it is not understood outside the church, what does it mean? Does it mean that you are only trying to please those who listen to you? So our problems with the thoughts, something called history. Although you have not majored yourself in history, there is a general history that's generally understood. At least one race does not have the right to invade other race and colonize them. Nowhere in history it can be justified for whatsoever reason it is. For example, if we invade Japan, and if we kill so many Japanese people, and if we put them into suffering, and if we say that is the teaching of Buddha taught us this, and if George Bush said when he invaded Iraq, although he did not care about a million people, but a lot of the decrease in the population during the Iraq War has shown that but a million people decreased. How can you say that is the saying of the God? No one has the right to do so. And even if there's a God and has given such an order, if you think that the order is so, then you should not listen to it. There is something that is not acceptable at all. Inside the church, under special conditions, if you say, if you beg for our understanding because it was spoken about under special circumstance, then I don't understand. And why would you? How could he accept someone who has spoken something like that as a prime minister? No matter how many times I try to understand, I cannot understand. I try to intake his sayings, giving so many conditions with so much understanding, but I could not. Well, of course, we can say something like this. There was a suffering, and in order to bear the suffering, we can say that maybe the God has given us a punishment. We should bear it. That's okay. Because you are saying it in order to bear it. The motivation here lies in your wish to overcome it. That's why we say that's maybe understood. But if you say it's a saying of the God, and if you feel that that is something that God has given you, something like a Korean War, then no matter how much you try, you can never take it back, or you can never restore it back to where it was. I criticize even those while driving you had a car accident, and if you say you were saved because of the Buddha's merit or Buddha's deed, that's not right. If that's the Buddha's merit, then he would not have given you the accident from the first place. If you say the other way, Buddha has not given you any punishment. Buddha has not given you virtue too. But if you look at it at a point, then you have not listened to Buddha properly, and you have been going on your own, and you have faced a suffering. So that is not the punishment given by the Buddha. Although it does not fit into the grammatical context, but you might think in this way: you have not listened to Buddha properly, and you have not followed the rules and regulations, and you have not helped others, and that's why if you are facing this suffering, you might understand in this way. But if you feel that because you have not listened to Buddha properly, and so you have met the car accident and on the verge of the car, and that's why you wish to listen to Buddha once again, then maybe that's acceptable. Then maybe you have been given the good virtue. You have received the good virtue of Buddha. So at times when you come and tell me that I made a car accident, but I will say because of the Buddha's virtue. But then at times like that, I think inside my thoughts that it is not true. I wonder if you have given such a thought while driving. The car that you're driving around, you use oil in order to run the engine, and it produces carbon dioxide. And all around the world, the carbon dioxide produced goes up to atmosphere and blocks the surface. And some of them the carbon dioxide that we produce every day causes the global warming. And if you ask what is the main cause of it, it's the cars that produce the carbon dioxide. It's one of the main reasons. We live a convenient life, and the preference for the cars, and also from the moment that you think cars are inventions, you start committing sins, or you started accumulating sins. So if you don't have this kind of self-awareness, then as a Buddhist, I think you have to think once again. If I am like a city mayor, or if I'm like a Seoul city mayor, like a Park Won-soon, I think it's good if we could do, or if we could take a few emergency measures, like I wish if we could just provide free transportation for buses, or all the buses are free in Yeosu, and we change it to natural gas, and maybe increase the number of buses running, and that could provide a lot of benefits. And I think about 300 to 400 billion or $1 million are enough, and that also means we are providing indirectly or directly to those who are not well off, and that also means you're giving them the chance to work in an economic way actively, or participate actively in economic methods. And the other one is it's okay even if we don't try to get too much parking lots around. And the last one is, as in an environmental way, it will be very beneficial. About 20 to 30 cars running equals to one bus running. Check about the carbon dioxide produced from 20 to 30 cars to that of a bus. Look at the differences. If they could take a measure like this, then the commoners will live a better life. Maybe they will be able to live a little more comfortable life, and maybe the oxygen will also be cleaner. But then these automobile companies will have a lot of grudges. But we should have that kind of self-awareness, that maybe we should try to reduce the use of the cars, and maybe we should try to reduce the air pollution, and if not necessary, we should try to reduce use of cars. This is a kind of joke, but in apartment, even when you're going to the bathroom, you use a vehicle. That means we need our self-awareness. I'm not telling you in order to save the oils. When the scientist has done the research, they have been able to find out that it is 100% because of the non-renewable fuels like the coals. But even the Americans are not reducing it. Compassion is a feeling that you want all the beings who are suffering, you want them to remove themselves from suffering. There are so many different types of sufferings. We have the dukkha, suffering of suffering. We are talking about the three different sufferings. The all-pervasive suffering of conditioning, the suffering of change, and also suffering of suffering. The suffering of suffering itself from the Sanskrit, it means it is unhappy, it is suffering, it is dark. So the method through which we live, not even a moment. There is no place or there is no time. Stay still in an area. While we are living in Yeosu, as a part of the community, we just moved around in Yeosu. We have lived our life like that, but there was no time. If you think about it, there was no space where you were stuck even for an hour, and there's no time when you have stood still. But even in your body cell, everything changed, and everything was moving from in the place of the time and also space. And through this big change, you have been able to carry on your life, and we call this the transmigration. And there is no place in this world where we can rest in peace. So in the way to Bodhisattva, they compare it to a traveler. So a traveler who asks for food from other people, he wonders, where should I rest next? Where should I go and ask for food next? So just as all the time they go through the change and no place to rest, you call it transmigration, and that's why we say it is miserable. That's why it's miserable. Even you all, when you are young, you wanted to remain as a daughter forever, but it was not possible. After some time, you were someone's wife, you were someone's mother, and you were someone's grandmother, you were someone's great-grandmother. Later, you'll be sitting in a coffin. You will change. And the fact that we feel bad all the time is when you look at yourself in the high school time, you feel, I had a moment like this. That's because it's a time where you cannot stay still even for a moment. That's why we feel the suffering. So if there is a highway for transmigration, and just like a resting place, you become a human and you die and you are born as an animal and you keep moving. One day you're in this form and the other day you are in the other form. Through so many different shapes that you take, you're being reborn. So the world compassion, because it keeps changing in the rebirth process, and in this process, if you try not to be flooded by the passing time, and if you want to be resurrected or redempted, then you follow the paths. Or if you're only following for money, then you become materialist. And someone like Yubangan, even who is looking for redemptions, he keeps hiding. And that's why everyone keeps talking about him on the press. And the police feels worse about him. It's very coward. It's very coward act of his. Jesus died himself in order to save all his disciples. But look at this man. At least if you are a parent, if your children has done something wrong, then you say that, oh, I will go to prison instead. But even the prosecutors, I think, but Yu Byung-hun, even when you are trying to catch his close ones, he doesn't want to come out, but he goes into more deeper hiding. Someone asked me, but still, isn't Yu Byung-hun a great person? He saved a lot of money. But he saved his money from cheating others. You don't say that is great, you say that's a worst act of his. If you have saved money in a good way, then we might say he's a great person. But still, even if he earned his money in a good way, if he doesn't want to spend it, then he's also still a bad person. But if he's only spending his money on buying good cars, then that is also not a proper act. Once someone was driving a car worth 4 million or 5 million, and I heard that he met a car accident and it broke down. And although I could not say in a public way, but I thought that's a good thing. Like his 5 million blew off in the air with 5 million. How many students can you send to college with all that money? Because the thought is very improper, there is no use to their thoughts. That's shabby or hideous materialistic knowledge. So feeling sad for the suffering of all sentient beings who are being reborn in the world, that is the compassion. The Triloka are desire limb, form limb, and formless limb. and the Kamadatu, the desire ring. Once I was watching TV, and one of the monk who is well known in Korea, he was talking about this desire rim in a wrong way. He said desire rim is the world of desire or greed, just like our human world. It is not so. Although there is greediness in human world, there are also some parts which does not have the greediness. We call the desire rim to that of hell and also the hungry of ghost. In there, about 90% of the beings are full of greediness. He did not have very good knowledge of the Buddhist doctrine. That's why he mentioned so. So the desire rim is in among the three loka. It refers to the hell and hungry ghost. If you keep thinking about bad things because of your greediness, you go to the desire rim. But in the Rupadatta, the form rim, although you have the greediness, there are times when you don't have the greediness. So here, when we say the form, that means we have a body that is animals and also human. And also the Arupadatta, the formless rim, which is opposite to Rupadatta, the form rim. That means our body form is not formed like a body, but it's like a dream. So it refers to asuras and heaven. So we say Kamadatu and Rupadatu and Arupadatu. And even something like this, when it's spoken on TV in Buddhist television, if the producer has some knowledge about the Buddhist doctrine, then he should do some editings. But he just broadcasts whatever is spoken by those who does not have a proper knowledge. So all living things in Triloka, the suffering of suffering, which was not translated properly in Korea. When you are then suffering of suffering is gogo in Korean, and so when you're dancing the gogo song, you're wearing bootcut jean pants. It is not that gogo. It is a suffering that is inherent just because we are born. You don't remember the suffering that you suffered when you were born, but I heard that it's miserable when you're born. It is also written in a scripture that's about the birth of a child. They say when a child is born, we wash the child, but just like you're put in a blessing furnace, you are surprised and you get scared. And when we wrap the child with a very soft clothes, you feel the pain that just like your body is surrounded or covered by thorns. You feel your child will feel better because you're clothing them with a very soft color, very soft clothes, but that's how they feel. And since it is their first time born in this human world, I heard that they go through great suffering. When you're born, when you listen to stories about someone who who almost died. They tell stories about whether they crossed the bridge or they were on the car. There is a moment where their consciousness is leaving their body. And just like that, when you're being born, you feel the pressure just as if you have come through a great cave and you feel the suffering. When you're born into a new world, you feel the suffering. We call that the suffering of life. When you put 28-year-old boxing with 19-year-old boxing, do you know what they say? The 28-year-old boxer will say, I lost because I am old. It's just 6 to 7 years difference, but he feels the suffering of age. Even you feel the suffering of change from time to time. You look at your wrinkles and look at your suffering. While you're making your new teeth, you have to put in money and one of our advice, she said, I don't look at the messenger very well. But then I thought about it, why she said that. And then I think it's because of the old age, she cannot look into her mobile phone in a very easy manner. That means she's not free because of her old age. Her knees hurt and her head hurts, blood pressure, loss of appetite, poor eyesight, and increase in the gray hair. Even when you're wearing makeup, if you have to wear more, but if you wear too much, then there is a crack in the wrinkles. These sufferings also come to you because you're growing old. That kind of suffering will grow wider depending on the age, and one day you'll face dementia, and when the youngsters they talk to you, you ask them, why are you doing this? But then one day you might also shed tears because you have taken all your efforts to bring your children, but they don't understand you. There are not many things that happens, or there are not many things that gets achieved because you're old age. Even if you tell a lot of things to youngsters, they don't understand. But they say, the old person, I think she's losing her consciousness. So when you get old, everything is difficult. The disease makes you feel difficult, and also the deaths, the suffering of that is way more disastrous than the suffering that you went through from the birth and also your life. So even if you try to bear it, it's difficult to bear it. It's same for everyone. Whether it's the person Bush, he had the power to blow off thousands of missiles throughout the world. you listen to him speaking to the Prime Minister of England. When you listen to it, it was quite awkward because he was treating the Prime Minister of United Kingdom just like a baby. There is no means to get rid of the suffering of death other than practicing samatha. It's not possible even for someone with great power. But for us, it is worse. We have developed and we have gone through the self-development. So inside our heart, we have a clear distinction. That is good for me and that is bad for me. And so you have grown attachment for those things that you like, and they also change. So even when you are living with your husband's mind changed, and you have changed too. Is there someone who has the same heart just like your honeymoon time? His heart is not the same. So because of the attachment, something called love, which is caused by attachment, if it doesn't change, then there is no need to feel bad about love. If you say it doesn't change, what is there to feel bad about it when it doesn't change? But it changes, that's why it causes problem, isn't it? And even the sense of hatred. Once someone told me that she cannot live with her husband anymore. And she came to me and I said, why didn't you come to me when you felt good about it? During the time when you loved that person so much, why didn't you come? And she said, because I felt good about it then. And when I asked her, why did it happen now? It's because of the change. So the condition that you have to separate or divorce happens, but even the condition that even if you hate, you have to live with that person happens too. For 30 years you live together, and for 30 years you have to make his food, but he still says your food is still the most delicious food. But I don't think so. I think it's because he's just trying to flatter you to eat. He says just a stew, soybean stew is enough, but it's not easy to make the soybean stew. When you look at it, it's just because they don't know how to make it. And when you say the grandmother is sick, he gets surprised and he feels better about it. Why? Because he wonders when to eat his meal. So even the time when you feel bad about the person, and even when you want to make your own food, and you want to go out with your friends, but even when you get old, there are not so many friends to go out with because they're all dead. And when you try to go with the young people, they don't even want to go with you. And even if you go to a senior house, then you're just sitting with all old people and it's not fun. Even when you're playing cards with them, later if someone wins all the money, then you get into argument with them. It's quite fun. So the suffering that we suffer inherently, or the suffering that we have added on top of our knowledge, the previous suffering is the suffering of living, and the second suffering is the suffering where you have to live with those who you don't want to. And also the suffering of greed. If you feel that if you have no wish, if you live in a big house, but then you go to a very small coffin, there is a suffering that comes from the unbalanced world. Some people are very healthy physically, but they have very unhealthy IQ. Some people have very good eyesight. But so when she goes to market, she can identify which is the best clothes, but she doesn't have money to buy the clothes. That kind of imbalance keeps happening. They accumulate and they get topped with other sufferings. We call that suffering of suffering. And the suffering of change, they keep changing because nothing has a form, and one day they destroy themselves. And also Earth will destroy itself one day, and there's nothing in this world that doesn't change. And also the all-pervasive suffering of conditioning. And you say because of the habit, you refer to those with changes because of your habit. If you've been smoking a lot, if you've been smoking for 45 years, then what happens? Even if you want to stop it, because of the power of your habit, you feel like smoking continuously. And due to this karma, you will keep smoking, and one day it will lead to results. And this will by accumulating all of them, that will become the basis of your suffering. Sentient beings in this world of cosmos is facing the three different sufferings in different forms, and that's why you have to practice the compassion for all the sufferings of all mankind. For the good of all the mankind who are going through or who are facing the suffering in this world of cosmos. And if you try to practice the sense of compassion, and also if you're seeking for sense of bodhisattva, you can overcome them together. That's what we are referring to. Like this, all sentient beings go through different sufferings, and they are not able to cut them from suffering, and they go through different sufferings all their life. Buddha has said so. We're not only referring to the hell, but even when you're born as a human, you're bound to be going through suffering. If you're born, then you are born with the consequence of death. That's why there's nothing that you can do much about it. That's why even when you're born in a heaven, maybe you'll be living for a long time. But because you're so full of joy, you cannot practice. And the moment when your virtue is all worn out, and when you're dying, or when you're being taken out from heaven, you feel great suffering too. Just like when you go to a mountain, when the higher the mountain is, it's more difficult for you to come down. Just like becoming a president, if you don't become a president, then there's no need for you to come down. So even when you become rich, if you have a lot of money, then you should stop thinking that that's yours. And if you live in a very economic way, and if you spend that money well for others, then you don't get hurt, because there's no reason for you to come down. I've told you a great merit today. There's no reason for you to get hurt. Maybe I'm just giving you two extreme examples, but that, like my speech before, that there's no chance of you becoming bankrupt. So the richer you are, or the more powers that you have, if you have become a president or the mayor of a city, then you should be more humble. Then only you won't get drunk by the taste of the power. If you get addicted to the taste of the power, it is more serious than the drugs. So you might say, "Oh, I'll be happy if I do it once," but then you want to do more and more. And some also say, "Oh, now you're of an age." If some people say so, you say because you're healthy, but no matter how healthy you are, your natural age cannot be ignored. Tell me, when should I retire from Seokcheon Monastery? What do you think? When I am out of consciousness? But I think the position of the head of a monk, I think if you're about 60 or 65, you should quit. Then only even the younger people, younger monks, they would be able to take into certain position. But you can still talk about the teachings or Buddhist doctrines. My wish is, because we have a very good mic nowadays, if I have a very good mic, and if I'm not able to speak loudly, you will be able to understand if I wear a very high quality mic. But at least in like in Japanese words, I should be able to say sayonara and go. I have practiced through 30 to 40 years of teaching. So when I die, I should be able to say something, because we have a very good mic nowadays. Like olden times, if they had bad mics, then if someone says study hard, or if I say study Buddhism and the someone who will be beside you recite, he's asking you to study hard, but it is not so nowadays, and there's no order in that. I believe I should be able to do something like that before I die. So if I come back next life, in order to meet once again, maybe I should say goodbye that way or so, or else I think it's a little boring. And maybe after my death, I hope they burn my body in place like a gymnasium where everyone can see. Then maybe people understand that everyone dies. There's no need to go into a mountain using a lot of logs, and I think burning a body is same like just burning a clothes. Even clothes don't take your flesh. What's the use of it? So like this, even the hungry ghosts go through severe hunger and thirst, and they're and even the body that's burned from the flame, they go through different suffering. Even the animals, they eat one another, they get angry, they die, and they kill. And in this way, they also you can observe that they go through different sufferings. Place in, the place in hell, we call it hell when the suffering doesn't stop even for a moment, and the hungry ghost, what do for the hungry ghost, their suffering from hunger is too great, is too huge. So the hunger and the thirst is so great that they scream until they lose their consciousness and they cry for food. Even though animals, when you see, they eat very rough food and they get scared in fear that they might be eaten by some other animal, and if some other animal chases them, they get scared, and while running away, sometimes their legs get broken. Even people, they cannot fulfill what they desire. They meet what they hate and they depart from what they love, and you can see that they go through this suffering too. The thought for the suffering should be very deep, then only your desire to escape from it arises. If you're sick, then you have a strong thought to escape from your sickness. Likewise, if you have a deep thought about your suffering, then you will have a strong thought to escape from your suffering. After learning and showing the method method to learn about suffering of mankind through love and affection, Kamla studies about different types of suffering. There are three different types of sufferings: the suffering of change, and all pervasive suffering of conditioning. Amongst these, there is no human being that doesn't suffer from any one of these suffering. Even the mankind who are born into this good samsara, they look happy instantly, but if you study deeply, their happiness also changes and they keep falling into a great suffering. They need compassion too. So even those people who are born into this world, although they look happy, they are not actually. Finally, they enter into suffering. They need compassion too. Even the beings who are already in the heaven, they need compassion too. Kamlashila has also spoken about the suffering in hell, the hungry ghosts, animals, and also human beings. He also mentions about the characteristics of a human making the sufferings. Some people are in chaos because of their bad thoughts. Anything can become the causes of their suffering, and that's why they fear their suffering is as great as standing on a cliff, on the edge of the cliff. The basis for human to have their suffering is caused by the greed, and if you cause the greed, then you become the slaves of your own greed. In order to fulfill your greed, for example, if there is some lady that you love so much, then you even bow to the pillar in the sight of the woman that you love. It is there in the way to Bodhisattva. In order to in order to feed your loved one, you come to the harbor and you take the boat. In Himalaya, you have never seen a ship, not even in pictures. 5,000, 4,000, 3,000 meters above sea level. For them to come down to Kathmandu, it takes about 5 days of walk and 5 days of bus, and for 10 days you have traveled, but you have never seen a sea. And when you say you have taken the boat, because of that you feel seasickness, and when you are trying to catch something by your net, you feel like you are being drowning to the sea. That causes great suffering. You feel miserable even when you're putting down the net. You feel miserable when you're pulling the net too. It's very difficult because they've never seen a ship before, and they've never boarded the ship before. But why did he come to the sea? In order to give bread and butter to the pretty wife. But what happens if he dies here? So if you listen to it, if a human does not have the greed for their attachment, then you do not become the slaves for it. If you say in order to earn money, you have got a job. If you look at it the other way, what is it? It means you have found a place to be a servant. It's just a play of words. We say you get salary. But what is the difference than living like a servant in olden time? So when you have a labor party, and when you do a demo, or when you try to talk to the company to give some more money, but in the end, when you say you're going to give up everything and become a monk, that means you're not going to become slave for it. You said you're not going to become slave, but then after you come here, you think, you feel like you want to earn some money by cheating some of the believers. That means again you have become the victims of your greed. In the end, everyone, like even someone like Yu Byung-won, he has victimized everyone because of his greed, because he became the slave of money. So he even made all others the slaves of money.
돈의 노예가 되어서 다른 사람들까지도 전부 다 자기를 따르는 노예가 되게끔 만들어주는 거란 말이에요.
But the funny thing is, the greed for attachment, if we say the number is 100, and if the number is full, if it reduces to 90, then you will have the chance to be free from it for 10%. And if you reduce your greediness to 50, then you will have the 50% of freedom. Even the freedom from that. If you understand 100% that everything that you are attached to is void, then you'll be free from that too. The process of that will not be miserable and will not cause you so much suffering. If you have desire and if you have greediness, then you become the servant of it. You cannot be free from it. All these are also causes of suffering. And also in some areas, some causes suffering because of misunderstanding from the thoughts. Because a human think, if the wrong thoughts become the causes of it, then it causes a great suffering. Even the case of Yu Byung-won is the same. Because his thoughts was wrong, it caused a great suffering to a lot of people. If you have such a wrong thought, because of these wrong thoughts, and if you have a thought, and if you act accordingly, then everyone who has relation with you becomes the victims, and you become persecuted too. You understand? Even this is the cause of the suffering. The great suffering, just as if you are standing on the edge of the cliff, will always be with you. Even those who are living in the heaven has a different kinds of suffering. They go through the suffering of change because everything changes. And they feel comfortable if the fear of death and also the fall to the lesser world troubles their heart all the time. For the suffering of the karmic forces of impermanence, the karma and agony is the natural cause. They have the characteristics of extinct in an instance, and it is applicable to all sentient beings. They feel the same like we do, so there's not much meaning to all. It's on TV nowadays. Who is it? The comedian. You don't watch the TV? You know the lady who tries to do voice fishing, but she cannot even succeed even one call, and says, "Oh, you're so surprised because the Great Wall was under Japan." She was shown on a new program where she was saying a lot of things beside a man who was playing guitar. And if you listen to what she says, among the things that she says, there are a few interesting things. Since we have taught them some,
그러니까 뭘 가르치죠
she
그러니까 아이고
there's also a joke that she says, "Senior, you're the best," but he says there is no meaning to it.
그렇게 사는 사람 있잖아.
Even though heaven that doesn't have any meaning.
이게
Even if you have lived for a long time,
별로 의미 없어. 그럼 뭐 오래 살았다 그러더라도
I think they say that the time that they feel,
일생 한 80년 이렇게 사는
whether we have lived for 80 to 90 years, is similar to what they feel.
그러니까 여러분이 아주 좋아하는 사람하고
If you spend time with someone that you love, and if you just eat something delicious, and if you watch a movie, then the time flies, right?
한편 뭐 시간이 빨리 가죠, 그죠? 2시간 반 그냥 휘딱 가.
And in the evening, when you have a toothache, then you don't feel like watching it, even they play the World Cup on TV.
그만큼 부어가지고
When you feel miserable, the time doesn't go.
월드컵 했는데 이제 골 한 골 먹었다 그냥 신경질이 나가지고 텔레비 끄락 고함 지르고 시간이 안 가.
The reason why you only remember the things while you're living is because you only remember the things that you hate,
시간이 안 가고
and you don't have much memory about it.
그래 별로 기억이 없어.
So when you're not going through a difficult time, I think you should always mention your time. You had fun for 1 hour.
안 그러고 재밌을 때는
If you look at it from our point of view, then you should know that the good times are already gone.
이제 시간 안 갈 때만 남았어. 본 시절 다 갔어.
Once I was hiking, and few high school kids were going, and they said,
고등학생 병은 저들끼리 가면서
I think they were
이러더라고요.
a family, 2 sons and 1 daughter, and their parents were left behind, and they were saying, the biggest kid said, "Oh, I am so old, I cannot go further."
그 제일 큰 놈이 야 형이 늙어서 못 가겠다.
He was merely a high school kid, and I felt so bad about it when I was following them.
저런 빌어먹을 놈이.
And even the children, they said, "Does your leg really hurt?"
그래 동생들이 또 뭐라 그러냐 뭐. 형 진짜 다리 아파.
He said, "I'm old now, so I cannot go faster than you." But from my opinion, he couldn't go because he was fat. They only had difference in like 3 to 4 years, but amongst that, they were talking about your age too.
안 나고 그런데도 그것도 나이 많다고 그래 갔더라고.
So, if you fall from the heaven, I heard it's very difficult. And the heaven, everything is like a dream.
천상이 어느 정도 천상이
If they want to eat fruits,
그
then
과일이 먹고 싶다.
then you can
과일이
smell the fruit, and you can
과일 모양하고 이게
see the shape of the fruit in front of you. There's no need to bite it either. You can taste it at the same time, and you feel full, and you don't even have to go to bathroom.
그리고 배가 부르네. 그러니까 똥을 누를 필요 없어.
Haven't you been there?
그안 가봤어요?
I guess you have been there once, but you forgot about it.
안 가봤어요? 이제 버렸겠지. 한 번은 가봤겠지.
Because when you're eating something delicious, and when you say, "Oh, the smell is brilliant," or "smells very nice," that's because your experience from heaven. But because we live in this human world, we have to eat to taste it once again. But just like in your dream, if you eat something delicious, doesn't mean you have to go to toilet. So just like that, and no one dreams for so long. So even your time in heaven ends very soon. You can smell it, you can taste it, your stomach feels full, and then the time ends. But nowadays, no matter how much there is development in technology, if you want to listen to a music, then you have to listen to it. But in the heaven, if you say Beethoven number 5, then you can hear the sound of it. If you wish increase in volume, then the volume will go up. I heard they do it with the neural waves in our brain, but I think it's a little different from what they do in heaven. Everything goes as per it's your dream. Even the clothes. There is no weight at all. Just like the ones that you wear in your dream.
계작업이라든지 이런 거 급을 얘기할 때, 한 급을 얘기할 때 천상에 천녀가 내려와 가지고 그 옷깃 무게 하나도 없는 옷깃으로 이 가로 세로가 인류순이나 되는 바위를 쫙 지나갔는데.
When you listen to the story, they say the angels, they come down from heaven, maybe once in 500 years, and they come down to our wall, and when their clothes that doesn't have any weight brushes against the rock, it disappears. Look at all these lies. Just like the number of sands in the Ganges. And so I tried to catch the sand in the river Ganges, but it was like a dust. It was very, very, very tiny, and the river was also very big. If you look at it from top, you cannot see the bottom. It's about 1,000 kilometers. Now, can you imagine how many sands are there? When they start counting the numbers, I thought it was a lie. But nowadays, when the scientists talk about the numbers, they said it's correct. The number of discovery that has been done so far is just like a sand in the river Ganges. And what about human? The fact that we cannot see is a different issue, but if you look at it from the universe, then there's nowhere where it can fit. Let's live our life in the sense of universe. At least we learn Buddhism, so let's live our life a little different way. Even if our body is not big, if your thoughts are big, then that should be enough. Just because you lost $100, there is no reason for you to feel the grief for 2 days. The $100 is not even a molecule if you compare it to the universe. During those time, if you talk about it, maybe from the voidness there was just a little plus or minus arising from the voidness, and then there is a sense of neutrality, and that's like the mother, father, and the son, and from here it disappears. We might say we had a family, and so there was a father, mother, and son. But if you look at it from the universe, then this is just a spark. There is not much meaning to it. If we leave everything and if we try to live, then there is not much meaning given to everything. In the Tripikata, there is nothing to gain. Everything flows as with the moment. Through the paramita, if the wisdom is the basis, you can experiment, and there is even lesser than a dust. We call that sentient beings. Amongst these, we live our daily life, and it is even vague, even more vague to it. But when they look at it from the heaven, we are just like that. When did they get married and have children? Although it makes us feel bad a little. So actually, it is nothing. So look broadly. And while living, while you are attached to it, there is nothing to be attached to. It's just that through the life you had built the relationship and you live on. And so those beings which are in heaven, when they drop, they also say, when their luggage are run out, when they want to, even if they think that, I want to eat a fruit, I want to eat a food, it's just like even if they wanted to eat a potato, they will taste the sweet potato. And later, when their luck is really out, then even if they want to eat, nothing will come to them. It is it is written in Abhidharma Kosa Karika, and so when your luck is run out, then they start seeing, they start living like how we do. Their clothes wear out, and our eyes and the taste, everything becomes similar to us. Once, when I was reading the fortune telling, and it read that person was actually in heaven, but he stepped 7 flowers in heaven, and so he was sent down to the human world. So I looked at it. But then when the person was born into this world, that person, since she was living in heaven, she should at least have the face from that heaven, but she didn't look any different. So even in heaven, if your luggage all run out, then you feel very miserable. So even for us, when you are about to die, you feel lonely before the death and also difficulty of moving. It's the same condition.
내 몸을 움직일 수 없는 어려움 등등을 갖다 생각해보고 똑같은 상황이야.
But for us,
근데 우리가 지옥에
hell, when you die,
그 죽을 때 그 뭐 어쩌냐면
because you have been suffering for so long,
참또 그게
they said it is as miserable as all the suffering that you have suffered for so far. It's never a place to go. So through this samsara, you move through different stages and you suffer. But for us, our instant suffering, like oh that person is hungry, but you should have the thought that you want to save them from their suffering, and that is the compassion and that is the sense of bodhisattva. You understood? Please work hard for the CMS for the research center. It's fine whether it's $50, whether it's $100 or $10. If it's $1,000, it's even better. If you could do that, and if you could bring that to me, I will give it to school directly, and I will try to see.